fraud has existed almost as long as human civilization has, with examples of it going all the way back to the ancient Egyptians. And it's still a major problem today, but the internet has made it much easier for cybercriminals to take advantage of us. I'm Danny Palmer. This is ZDNet Security Update. With me to discuss fraud and how it's affecting us now, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, is Yuelin Li, VP of Strategy and Development at Onfido. Thanks for joining me, Yuelin. So first of all, what sort of online fraud are we seeing right now? Because as I just touched upon, the internet has made it much easier for this sort of thing to happen. Cybercriminals can access people around the world now rather than having to go face to face to commit fraud.
Hi, Danny. Thanks for having me. So Onfido are a identity verification company, and hence we are in some ways at the beginning of the customer experience for a lot of our customers who are companies that work in financial services or at travel or transportation or retail and so on. And we have actually seen quite a significant increase in fraud through our customers using fraudulent IDs, even in the last year compared with the year before. So in 2019, around 4.1% of the documents that came through our system for people who are applying for bank accounts and else were fraudulent IDs. In 2020, this went up to 5.8%, which is a 40% increase and pretty significant. Which I think is exactly as you said, due to the fact that you can apply for more things online, you can do more things online, people were forced to do things online, and hence it then became easier for different or more common, I think, rather than easier for people to try and pretend to be someone else, use a deep fake, try to create a synthetic identity and so on.
That's certainly been the case. No, I'm obviously, as you can see here, I'm talking to you from where I live because this is where I have to do my work at the moment. Where a lot of us are still in lockdown, still we have restrictions to where we can go. We spent a lot of the last year with online and being our only outlet to go and see the rest of the world, really. And we've all sort of signed up to probably a lot more online services, doing more things, but it's been convenient for us. But that's also created additional pathways for cybercriminals and fraudsters to try to get to us. I mean, there's one that's been doing the rounds fairly recently here in the UK, where it claims to be a text message from the post office saying, "You've got a package waiting for you here. Click this link to retrieve it." When that is some fraudsters trying to take advantage of how we're all stuck at home right now. So I suppose it's almost for want of a better term, sort of perfect storm for some fraudsters in this space, because we're all so reliant on being online now, and we're all quite used to dealing with various things, be it work or personal items, all via online, clicking links in emails or text messages and things like that.
We definitely see that there are companies that historically didn't have such a great digital relationship with their customers, which makes them more vulnerable to this type of attack. Is in what you described. If you were a company that had an app or had a consistent digital relationship with your customer, then they're less, you don't need to use a text message, or they're less likely to see this as something as normal because they know how you normally interact with them. Whereas definitely if you haven't interacted with them before, or don't have a more secure channel of interacting, then this makes it more likely, oh, maybe the post office did send me this text message, rather than going through the post office app and being like, why would they send me this message? Because it's not come up on my account in any way.
It's sort of a blessing and a curse in a way that we can see every single transaction we make in our online bank accounts and that sort of thing. But I suppose that's also making things potentially easier for fraudsters as well, because if somehow they can get examine data or maybe go into our accounts somehow and see what activity we've been up to, they can exploit that either to do things which might be look familiar to us and go, okay, I've ordered from this shop before, so that's not going to be a problem, or just maybe even outright steal identities and use our identities without us knowing, in order to essentially line their own pockets, I suppose. Because when it comes to fraud and cybercrime, a lot of it is at the end of the day about making money.
It does come back down to money. I mean, as an identity verification company, we strongly believe that you need to have robustness in your systems when it comes to identity. So if you are willing to if you are rely on something such as like knowledge-based, which easily can now be found in the public domain, or even passwords, because we know a lot of people don't set very strong passwords, and then you're just letting your system be more vulnerable. And there are lots of different technologies now you can use and leverage. So whether that's a system like ours, such as anchoring your identity to your legal identity at the beginning of the journey and then capturing a biometric, or even leveraging your device and the device signals or device capabilities, we feel really strongly that these things that are very sensitive and high moments of risk should be thought of as much and mitigated as much as possible using technology.
And technology does play a big role in all of this. There was a point, early last year, I got a text message from my bank going, we're going to send you a message just to check this is you. And I got the message saying, is this you or no? We think this might be suspicious activity. Is this you trying to make a purchase at what turned out to be a gas station in South America, which was quite clearly not me. I was sat here in London. But I suppose ultimately technology has played a role in them being able to use that extra step there to try and protect my account, because they've seen where I'm based, they've seen my activity, and I suppose seeing me suddenly turn up in South America, having been using my bank card probably somewhere in London earlier that very day, was something that would have tipped them off that this is suspicious activity. And that's there are easy markers like that which can help companies detect fraud, but it's not always that easy when cybercriminals are getting more sophisticated at trying to play tricks in order to steal identities and commit fraud.
That makes a lot of sense, because what it actually comes down to is actually layering all of these different signals, what you described. So if they knew that your phone was still in London and you last used your card in London, then the fact that this transaction was happening somewhere else feels even more suspicious. And then they need to contact you in a secure channel, or they might link it up with other, if you've been doing paying it physically in a different place, but then online something else, and layering all of these different things. I think as someone who works in identity, what you see is that actually the vulnerabilities are what attackers will attack. So you have to really think through all of these different parts and layer on. In this case, we'll use your IP address. In that case, we will use where your device is based. In that case, we'll use your biometrics, and making sure there's no really weak spots that can be targeted by attackers. We've definitely, as you said before, they are out to make money. And if there's a weak spot that they can exploit, then they will definitely exploit that weak spot. And we're in a point where they don't need to physically take cards off people to be able to do that kind of exploitation. They can do it digitally. If your whole system is reliant on, say, a social security number or a national insurance number, that kind of information can be bought in bulk for hardly anything on the darknet. So you need to really think through for all of your different parts and your different experiences, like what is the vulnerability and the lowest common denominator, and try and patch it up that way.
And that's one of the worrying things for people and organizations, I suppose, how over the last, let's say 10 years, to keep it short in a way, there's been so many data breaches, so many big cyber attacks, so many instances of major companies losing or having private information accessed, and people's bank details, names, dates of birth, social security numbers, for the case in the US, all out there on the internet. And there's some of that you can change. I mean, you can change your phone number, you can change some of your bank details. But when it comes to identity fraud, you can't change your date of birth. You could change your name, I suppose, but it'd be a lot of effort for trying to avoid identity fraud. And there's just some of that information out there, which I suppose for all of us is public facing, which can make this sort of thing tricky to defend against, especially when you can search the internet and go on services and see what breaches your email address has been breached in, and you can see, okay, these 10 companies have leaked my information. That's 10 companies which could potentially lead to cyber criminals and fraudsters trying to get hold of your identity for whatever they want to do with it. Be it steal your bank details, apply for credit cards, or various other things that I'm sure that we haven't even thought of right now as technology moves forward.
So we see this identity. There's actually three components, right? There's the things that you know, the things that you have, and then who you are, or the things you are. And the things that you know, I think it is becoming quite a weak form of a weak form of authentication, because the things that you know, so much of it is available in the public domain, or can be sourced in some way, and hence you see greater reliance on the things that only you have, which usually comes down to whether it's a device or a ID document or something that really there isn't a lot of in the world and really belongs to you. And then actually also corroborating that with the things that you have. And I think that's why we are seeing an increase in, previously it was fingerprints, but that's actually very hard to scale because not everyone has a scanner. So now face biometrics. And it's the triangulation of all of these different, I think coming back to this layers, just one of them will be vulnerable, and being able to connect multiple creates a much stronger experience. So even in this case, if I knew your social security number and other information about you, but I want to access your account, well, if you ask me for a face, and especially a live face, that's much trickier. But it has to be a live face, because otherwise I can get a picture of your LinkedIn profile and so on. And so you're adding in these different layers of complexity and really leveraging the device that you have to be able to build more robust security. And then the next extension is, oh, please also provide a live movement of your ID card. Suddenly you become a much harder target for these fraudsters who want to steal your identity.
And as we've seen in the news this year, particularly in the UK, biometrics is becoming quite a hot topic, because they're examining if they're going to be using sort of facial recognition and things like that as a means of determining if you've had your COVID vaccine, or if you can go in and out of bars and places. And there's whole sorts of civil liberties ideas around that. But when it comes to the biometric element, when it comes to security, I suppose it kind of is one of the most secure ways you can secure something in terms of your account. So I say you need to scan your face. Only you have your face, and if a fraudster's not being able to get hold of that unless they've got some really sort of cutting edge technology, let's describe it as.
So we're to distinguish between biometrics for like mass use and consent-based biometrics for one-off use. I think the new AI legislation that's coming out of Europe also makes that quite distinctly different. So biometrics where you're not aware of it and it's been captured and you're in a physical space and so on, there's definitely a lot of civil liberty and privacy aspects that we need to think very, very seriously about. I think when it comes to more one-off consent-based biometrics, where you're using it to gain access to something, and also it's being matched one-to-one against something you already have, I think they are quite different things. And often when people talk about biometrics, then become like, what they're actually referring to is this big mass biometrics that you don't have control over, rather than a very one-off point where you are using your biometrics, you're giving consent, it's not been stored, it's just being used for that process and then it goes away.
And when it comes to the whole COVID-19 vaccination element, as we've been seeing this year, there seems to be cyber criminals and entrepreneurial in a way, because some people want to have documents that say they've been vaccinated even though they haven't. And this is just another area of fraud that's now seemingly opened up on sort of underground forums in the dark web, where this sort of fake documentation is now available because I guess there's a market for it. And when it comes to cybercrime, they don't have any scruples about how to make money. If there's money to be made, they'll try to make it.
So with the introduction of, if you're going to introduce like a COVID passport, then it does need to be robust, non-transferable, and also very privacy centric. And I think if this is not thought through the system, then you'll have lots of different loopholes and also lots of opportunities for crime. And that's one of the things we answered in the government consultation about, is if you're going to do it, you have to really think through all of these different parts. If you don't have a level of robustness, then how can people rely on it? If it's something that can easily be solved, then definitely there's a lot of issues there. And then lastly, in terms of the privacy angle, it's very sensitive in this country. You should only be disclosing the bits of information that needs to. I think these pillars really need to be thought of very clearly, and made very, very clear to the general public, exactly like how they're participating, how their data is used, how the data is stored, how robust it is, if they need to make changes, how inclusive it is, etc.
So when it comes to the general public, us, I suppose, how can we make sure that we are as protected against identity fraud as possible, considering all the potential threats that are out there? But there must be some things we can all do to help keep our identity safe.
So I think there are basics that would really be helpful for everyone. So if we think of the triangle of what you know, who you are, and what you have, then something like multi-factor on all of your key accounts, and regardless of what that factor is, whether it's biometric or a SMS or a push notification, that is a huge deterrent and much more difficult. I think there are weaknesses to using the SMS, but it's still much stronger than not having it in place. And then the other two are quite pretty strong. And then the second one is actually having if you're going to have to do passwords, having secure passwords and making sure that you're not making yourself an easy target. And then, of course, not disclosing. Don't take pictures of your passports and IDs and put them on the internet, and all of the other basics. I mean, we've seen, I think there is a CEO who posted a picture of their boarding pass, and using the information on that, they could get a lot of information about him that I'm pretty sure they didn't want available in the public domain. So there's a lot of things that nothing will prevent you from not being ever targeted, but there are so many things that do that are quite simple, but actually are hugely beneficial and impactful in stopping you from being a victim.
Oh, there's a lot to think about there, Yuelin. Thanks for joining me on ZDNet Security Update. It was a very interesting chat. And for more information on how to keep yourself and your company safe from online threats, subscribe to the ZDNet YouTube channel and keep reading ZDNet for news articles and features on these subjects. Thanks for watching.